Most tabby owners think they know exactly what pattern their cat has. Stripes, right, simple. Except, it's not always that simple. Some tabby patterns look almost identical at first glance, and plenty of experienced cat parents have been calling their cat the wrong pattern for years without ever realizing it. Maybe you've had this exact moment yourself. Someone asks, "Oh, what kind of tabby is that?" And you kind of just shrug and say the striped kind. By the end of this video, that's going to change. You'll be able to look at your own cat and know, with total confidence, exactly what you're looking at, and probably impress a vet tech or two along the way. Hi, welcome to Tabby Striped Cat, the place for people who want to identify, understand, and better care for their tabby cats. Today we're answering one of the most common questions tabby owners ask. How do you actually know what kind of tabby cat you have? Not tabby cats in general, your cat. The specific one currently sleeping on your keyboard, or ignoring you from the top of the fridge, or staring at you like you're supposed to already know the answer. Here's something that surprises a lot of people. There are 5 officially recognized tabby patterns, not just one generic tabby look. And most cats give you 2 or 3 clear signs that point you straight to the right answer, once you know what you're actually looking for. So get comfortable. Maybe go grab your cat if it'll hold still that long, and let's figure this out together. Before we start picking apart patterns, it helps to understand why tabby markings exist in the first place. And I promise, no biology lecture here. Think of it like this. Every cat's coat is really the result of 2 separate instructions, layered on top of each other. One instruction decides the base color, black, orange, gray, whatever that cat happens to be. The other instruction decides the pattern, basically, where that color gets concentrated, and where it gets left lighter. It's less like paint and more like a stencil laid over the paint. That stencil is the tabby gene, and it happens to be one of the most common coat patterns in the entire cat world, wild and domestic alike. There's actually a good reason for that. Out in the wild, that broken up, dappled coloring helped cats blend into grass, brush, and shifting light, a kind of built-in camouflage passed down from their ancestors. Domestic cats haven't needed to hide from predators in a long time, but the genetics never got the memo, so that same stencil is still showing up on millions of house cats today, including, most likely, yours. Here's where it gets interesting. Almost every domestic cat carries some version of that tabby stencil, even the ones you'd swear are solid-colored. Some of them just have such a faint version of it that you can barely see it under normal light. You'll notice this if you've ever seen a solid black cat catch bright sunlight just right, and suddenly you can make out faint ghost stripes running across their back. That's not your imagination. That's the tabby pattern trying to show through a coat that's mostly suppressing it. So when we talk about mackerel, classic, spotted, ticked, and patched tabbies today, we're really just talking about 5 different versions of that same underlying stencil, each one distributing color across the coat in its own distinct way. Once you see the differences side by side, they're honestly pretty easy to tell apart. Let's start with the most common tabby pattern out there, mackerel. If your cat has narrow, vertical stripes running down its sides, like the rungs of a ladder, or the bars of a xylophone, you've got a mackerel tabby. That's actually exactly where the name comes from. The stripe pattern resembles the skeleton of a mackerel fish, with one solid stripe running the length of the spine, and narrower stripes branching off it like ribs, wrapping around the sides of the body. Mackerel tabbies are sometimes nicknamed tiger tabbies, and honestly, that nickname earns its keep. You're basically looking at a house-sized preview of what a tiger's stripe pattern would look like shrunk down onto your couch cushion. Same general idea, dramatically smaller scale. A quick way to check your own cat. Look at the sides of the body, right around the rib cage, where the fur is easiest to see clearly. If the stripes there are thin, fairly straight, and mostly running vertically rather than swirling into circles. That's your answer. It's also worth checking the tail, since mackerel tabbies almost always carry that same striping straight down the tail as well, usually in evenly spaced rings. Mackerel is also, statistically, the most common tabby pattern found in domestic cats worldwide. So if you've gotten this far and you're still not totally sure which pattern your cat has, there's a genuinely good chance this is the one. It's simply the pattern that shows up most often, in the same way brown is the most common eye color in people. Not a rule, just the odds. Now here's the pattern most people actually picture when someone says classic tabby cat. Appropriately enough, it's literally named classic. Instead of narrow, straight stripes, classic tabbies have bold, wide, swirling markings, often forming a distinct bullseye or spiral shape on each side of the body. Picture a marble cake, the kind where chocolate and vanilla batter get swirled together in big looping curves instead of poured in separate, clean layers. That's the general idea here. Broad blotches and curves instead of thin, straight lines. The easiest place to spot this is right on the side of the cat's body, just behind the shoulder. Classic tabbies almost always have that unmistakable circular, target-like swirl sitting right there. Some people call it the oyster marking, others call it the bullseye. Either way, if your cat has that spiral pattern, you've got yourself a classic tabby, sometimes also referred to as a blotched tabby in older breed literature. This is where a lot of tabby owners genuinely get tripped up, because from across the room, a classic tabby and a mackerel tabby can look surprisingly similar. They're both striped, generally speaking, and both give off that overall tabby impression. But get a little closer, and the difference becomes obvious almost instantly. Thin and straight means mackerel, wide, curved, and swirled means classic. Once your eye catches that distinction one time, you'll never unsee it again. It becomes almost automatic. Next up is spotted tabby, and this one tends to genuinely surprise people, because it doesn't look like a typical tabby at first glance at all. Instead of stripes, spotted tabbies have distinct, separate spots scattered across the body. Breeds like the Bengal or the Arsa cat are famous for this look, bred specifically to enhance it, but plenty of everyday mixed breed cats have it too, completely naturally. Here's a genuinely helpful way to think about where this pattern comes from. Spotted tabby markings are essentially broken up mackerel stripes. Imagine those same thin, vertical lines from earlier, but instead of running continuously from top to bottom, they've fractured apart into a row of individual spots, almost like Morse code instead of a solid, unbroken line. The spots themselves can be round, oval, or slightly elongated depending on the individual cat, but the key giveaway that separates this from the other patterns is that the spots stay separate from one another, rather than connecting into a continuous stripe or swirl. If your cat's coat reads more like leopard print than tiger print, spotted is very likely your answer, and it's honestly one of the more striking patterns to spot in person, no pun intended. This next one is the pattern people misidentify the most, because at first glance, a ticked tabby can genuinely look like it has no pattern at all, like a plain, solid-colored cat. Ticked tabbies, sometimes called agouti tabbies, don't have stripes, swirls, or spots across most of their body. Instead, each individual hair carries alternating bands of light and dark color running along its length, a little like a candy cane, if you zoomed in close enough, repeated across millions of individual hairs. From a few feet away, all that alternating color just blends together into an overall shimmery, sandy, or salt and pepper appearance, without any obvious lines to point to. So how do you tell if your seemingly solid cat is actually a ticked tabby underneath it all? Check the face and legs first. Even ticked tabbies almost always keep some classic tabby markings there, tabby cheek lines around the whiskers, and often faint striping on the legs, paws, and tail, even when the main body looks completely smooth and uniform. The Abyssinian breed is the most famous example of this pattern, prized specifically for that shimmering ticked coat. But you'll find it showing up in plenty of mixed breed cats too, especially in certain regions of the world where it's naturally more common in the local cat population. If you've ever looked at your own cat and genuinely wondered, is this cat even a tabby, or just solid colored? Ticked is very often the quiet answer hiding in plain sight. The last pattern works a little differently from the others, because it's really a combination of two things happening at once. Patched tabby, more commonly known by its nickname, Torby. A Torby is what happens when the tabby pattern and tortoiseshell coloring show up on the same cat together. Tortoiseshell, if you're not familiar with the term, refers to that patchy mix of black and orange coloring, and it's a coloring almost exclusively found in female cats, thanks to how those particular color genes are inherited. When you layer tabby markings into that tortoiseshell mix, you get patches of orange tabby striping sitting right next to patches of black or gray tabby striping, giving the whole coat a mottled, almost paint splatter effect that's genuinely one of a kind. The easiest way to spot a Torby is to look for two things happening simultaneously: patches of two distinctly different base colors, like orange and black, and actual tabby striping visible within those individual patches, rather than just flat, solid blocks of color sitting next to each other. It's one of the most visually unique tabby patterns out there, because no two Torbys ever really look exactly alike. The placement of those patches is essentially random on every single cat, which means your Torby's coat pattern is, quite literally, one of a kind. So now you've got all 5 patterns in your back pocket. But here's where it gets interesting. Plenty of cats don't fall neatly into just one category, and that's honestly what trips up even experienced, long-time cat owners. It's actually pretty common for a single cat to show more than one pattern depending on which part of the body you're looking at. You might have a cat with clear mackerel stripes running down the body, but spotted-looking markings across the belly. Or a classic tabby with faint, ticked-looking fur along the legs. This isn't a flaw or a mistake in your cat's coat. It's completely normal, and it comes down to how tabby genes can express themselves slightly differently across different regions of the body, especially the legs, belly, and tail. If you're finding this helpful so far, and I hope you genuinely are, this is a good moment to go ahead and hit that like button. It sounds small, but it really does help this video reach more tabby owners who are sitting there right now asking themselves the exact same question you probably had 5 or 10 minutes ago. Okay, back to the patterns. If your cat seems to show 2 different patterns depending on where you look, don't second guess yourself and don't assume you're doing something wrong. Just focus on whichever pattern shows up across the majority of the body. That's generally considered your cat's primary, defining tabby pattern. No matter which of those 5 patterns your cat has, there's one single marking that shows up on almost every tabby cat, regardless of which body pattern they're carrying. And it's probably the single most famous tabby trait that exists. Look at your cat's forehead, right above the eyes. See that M-shaped marking sitting there? That's not random, and it's not decoration. That M appears on mackerel tabbies, classic tabbies, spotted tabbies, ticked tabbies, and Torbys alike, essentially acting as the tabby gene's signature mark, regardless of whatever's happening across the rest of the coat. There are a handful of charming folktales floating around about where that M actually comes from. Some people say it stands for Mao, the ancient Egyptian word for cat, tying back to how revered cats were in that culture. Others have their own regional legends. Whatever the true origin turns out to be, if you ever want a fast, genuinely reliable way to confirm your cat is a tabby in the first place, even when the body pattern feels ambiguous or hard to pin down, check the forehead first. It rarely lies. Quick note before we move on, because I know this question is already forming in your head. What about color? Orange tabby, gray tabby, brown tabby. Does that change which pattern your cat has? Nope, not even a little. Color and pattern are 2 completely separate systems working independently. Remember that layered stencil idea from earlier. Color is essentially the paint, and pattern is the stencil laid on top, and the 2 mix and match freely. An orange cat can be mackerel, classic, spotted, ticked, or Torby. So can a gray cat, a brown cat, or a cream-colored cat. The color has genuinely no bearing on which of those 5 patterns shows up. We're actually covering tabby color in its own dedicated video, because it deserves a proper deep dive of its own, rather than a rushed mention here. But for today, just file this away. Whatever color your particular cat happens to be, It has nothing to do with the pattern conversation we've been having this whole video. Alright, let's actually put all of this to use. Go look at your cat right now, or pull up a recent photo if they're mid-nap somewhere inconvenient, which, let's be honest, is most of the time, and let's walk through the process together, step by step. First, check the forehead. Is there an M sitting right above the eyes? If yes, congratulations, you're officially dealing with some version of the tabby pattern, whatever else is going on with the rest of the coat. Second, look closely at the sides of the body. Thin, straight, vertical lines running down the sides. That's mackerel. Wide, swirling, bullseye-style markings, especially behind the shoulder. That's classic. Separate, distinct spots that don't connect into lines. That's spotted. Third, if the body looks mostly solid or has that shimmery, sandy quality with no clear lines or spots visible anywhere, but the M is still sitting there on the forehead, check the legs and face closely for any faint striping. That specific combination, solid-looking body, marked face and legs, usually points to ticked. And fourth, if you're seeing distinct patches of two different colors, like orange sitting next to black or orange next to gray, with tabby striping still visible inside those patches, you've got yourself a Torby. That's genuinely it. 4 quick checks, maybe 2 minutes of actually looking, and you'll know exactly what you're working with. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit subscribe while you're here. We're building out a full library of videos just like this one, everything from color genetics to personality traits by pattern to coat care tips, and I'd genuinely love to have you around for the rest of it. Before we wrap up the pattern breakdown, there's one exception worth mentioning, because I don't want you second-guessing yourself if your cat stubbornly refuses to fit perfectly into just one box. Some cats show what's casually referred to as a mixed tabby appearance, traces of more than one official pattern blended together, without any single one being overwhelmingly dominant across the whole body. This happens because tabby patterning is actually influenced by more than one gene working together behind the scenes, not just a single simple on-off switch. Think of it less like flipping a single light switch and more like several dimmer switches, all set to slightly different levels, all working on the same coat at once. This is genuinely more common than most people realize, especially in mixed-breed cats without a defined pedigree tracing their lineage. If your particular cat looks like it's maybe 70% classic tabby with a little spotted mixed in along the belly, that's not a sign you're misreading anything, and it's definitely not a sign something went wrong with your cat's coat. That's simply your cat's own unique genetic combination showing up exactly the way it's supposed to, which, honestly, makes them even more one of a kind. Here's the thing though, no matter which pattern your cat ended up with, or even if it's a delightful blend of 2 or 3, the pattern itself doesn't determine their personality, their health, or how much you should love them. It's genuinely just a beautiful bit of natural variation, the same reason no 2 tabby cats ever look completely identical, even littermates raised in the exact same home. Understanding your cat's pattern is a fun, satisfying piece of the puzzle, and now you've officially got it figured out. But the real, everyday work of being a great tabby owner happens in the ordinary stuff: plenty of mental stimulation, safe places to climb and perch and hide, good nutrition, regular vet care, and simply paying attention to what your particular cat needs to feel secure and content. No matter which of those 5 patterns your cat has, helping them live a happy, healthy, enriched life is what really matters most. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to Tabby Striped Cat and like this video if you would like to be notified of future videos. Check the description for a list of tabby cat supplies.